Well, and as we build up to the polls of the May 29, misinformation and disinformation continues to be of great concern as voters will be actively seeking information on various candidates, voting stations and campaigns, and fears over the integrity of the electoral process and safety of campaigns may be at risk. So how can technology aid protecting voters, political candidates as well, and campaigns to ensure a smooth electoral season? Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google, Abongile Mashele, now joins us for this discussion. Abongile, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. Before we go into what some of the proposals are and some of the policies that Google has come up with, what's Google's observation and assessment around disinformation and misinformation specifically in South Africa in relation to the elections?
Good morning, Aldrin. Thank you so much for having us. I think as a company, we've acknowledged that globally, misinformation and disinformation is an issue that impacts on technological platforms across the globe, across the board, including our platforms, particularly when there is user-generated content, as you would find on our platform as YouTube. It's a phenomenon that is being dealt with across the globe by governments, by technology companies, and South Africa is not unique. Even though we may not have had a significant number of incidences on our platforms, as Google in South Africa, it's something that we take seriously, and we have been proactive in engaging with the relevant players before the electoral period to make sure by the time we get to this point, we have the necessary policies and resources in place, and also the necessary relationships so that we can tackle it beforehand.
Yeah. What would you say some of the lessons that have been learned for Google are when we look at elections that have taken place in other countries, the United States, elections, for instance, in the European Union countries as well? What would you say that this is what Google has picked up, and this is how we're going to remedy it?
If you look at some of the interventions that we've put in place since the 2018 elections in the US, for instance, it shows that there are some significant lessons that have been learned in the company. For one, we have a whole elections integrity program that we implement across the globe in elections. So in all the countries that have elections across the globe, we actually are executing the integrity program. In South Africa, for instance, last year we launched our political ads policy so that we have a way or a mechanism of facilitating political advertising on our platforms that will allow us to know who has placed adverts, where are they from, how much money have they spent, and we have a transparency report that is published online that anyone can access. These are all new interventions that have been put in place. We have security features that we have put in place, advanced protection programs, particularly for political players, to ensure that they are adequately protected on our platforms. So since 2018, quite a few things have been put in place. And also from a misinformation perspective, just ensuring that we have adequate fact-checking mechanisms, particularly for your newsrooms, are some of the interventions that we've put in place over the years, and we are constantly improving the system because there will always be new ways that people will try and beat the system, and it's something that we are constantly looking at as a company.
Yeah, and here's the thing about misinformation as well as disinformation is when we speak about fact-checking, facts according to whose facts according to whose truth, and how is Google able to assess that? Because, for instance, we can report something else right now as a news platform, and another news platform reports on the very same story, but in a different way, different angle, with different facts as well, maybe sometimes even distorted. How then does Google, would Google be able to determine this is a factual representation of the story, comparing the two broadcasters?
So we've got multiple ways or mechanisms that we've put. For instance, in South Africa, we're working with the Africa Check coalition that works with newsrooms across the board so that we have a uniform understanding of what the source of truth is. What is the truth when it comes to certain information? How do we verify that information? But secondly, particularly around the elections, you find misinformation will emanate from things like people saying voting station X is closed, which is why a partnership with the IEC becomes critical and it becomes important, because the IEC in this instance becomes the source of truth. They are the ones that manage voting stations. They are the ones that work with electoral processes. So we work quite closely with them, and we have a relationship with the IEC, as well as the Real 411, which is an NGO run by the Media Monitoring Africa, which is a real-time reporting portal for consumers or for members of the public if they have specific issues that perhaps they may have reported on our YouTube platform, because we already have mechanisms there, but they want further intervention from a third party. So we have those relationships. So it's a multifaceted engagements that we've looked at to ensure that the newsrooms are capacitated, but we are also capacitated. But over and above that, we have moderation systems as a company that are automated, but we also have human beings that understand the nuances in South Africa, that understand the legal context and the socio-economic context, who actually review the content if it's something that was not picked up by our machines or by our automated classifiers, and then they would review and remove if it's something that contravenes our policies.
Yep. So just paint us a picture. So how would this happen? Let's say it is the 29th of May. Somebody says that a certain voting station has been closed. Then what happens? What's the process that Google will then follow to verify with the IEC whether this is true or not?
Firstly, I would encourage, if someone picks up something and they find that it is not true and they pick it up on our platforms, on YouTube or even on Google search, it's encouraged for you to flag it, because we have a team that is on them constantly reviewing content, anything that is flagged, especially around electoral periods or election times. Then that would then go through our trust and safety team, and the trust and safety team would review, and if there is a need to verify whether this information is true, whether the IEC voting station is closed or not, they would then verify that with the in-country teams, which would be people like myself, and because we have a direct relationship with the IEC, then we would review that information and revert it back into the system. Similar with the Real 411. So if the report comes in via the Real 411 portal, they also have that direct line with the IEC, and they would flag it on our platform if something is not true and needs to be flagged or removed. So it's many moving pieces, and the timelines, Aldrin, are quite short. We want to make sure that we have an instantaneous way of removing content. Just to give you stats from our normal content removal processes, 97% of content that contravenes our policies is usually removed before it even hits your screens. So we want to keep that stat in place and even improve on it, so that 3%, at least, we find a way of minimizing it, especially during elections, because we understand the impact it can have in the public domain.
Yeah. Do you then have, as Google, an interface with the other social media platforms that not necessarily fall under the Google group, but these are also social media platforms where the misinformation and disinformation can be spread? And with that said as well, the ability, for instance, to detect whether this is a deep fake that we are dealing with here, because we are speaking about campaigning, and sometimes some people are left vulnerable to believe that this is what a politician actually said, only to find out that actually this was AI generated.
We certainly do. Just on a global platform, we've signed a security protocol at the Munich Security Conference, where we've agreed to work together, especially on things like AI and deepfakes, to be able to identify deepfakes that are placed on our platforms, especially if people have not complied with the policy that requires you to disclose something before you upload. So on a global level, we are working together, and in South Africa as well, most of the major social media companies or technology companies are actually signatories in the relationship that I made reference to with the IEC. So namely, not to punch them, but namely your Meta, Facebook, your TikTok as well. those 3 companies or technology platforms have signed the agreement of cooperation with the IEC, and we have been working together for the last year to actually also train political parties on the policies that our platforms have, on the reporting mechanisms that are available on our platforms, as well as the security features that are available on our platforms. As Google, we have our own security features, Meta would have their own, and everyone else would have their own as well.
Yeah. One of the things that came out of the 2018 elections in the USA was the use of algorithms and how algorithms can push voters in a certain direction. What's Google's anecdote to this?
Well, our anecdote, I think the main thing in the 2018 election, it was largely around advertising, targeted advertising, and unknown players placing adverts, lack of a better word. So our political ads policy that was implemented in South Africa in 2023 actually requires any means of any form of political advertising that will be made on our platforms for the individual who is placing that ad to register with us, so that we know who you are. For you to also comply with our content moderation policy. So if we remove any political ad, maybe it's making false claims or it's making defamatory statements, we actually publish that in our transparency report. We also disclose the financial value of the advert, and we also limit targeted advertising. So the great thing about digital markets and digital advertising is that you can have a targeted advertising based on your likes and dislikes as an individual. But when it comes to political advertising, we've actually limited that to the gender, the age, as well as the location of the individual. But you cannot target users beyond that as anyone who places political ads. So those are some of the safeguards that we've put in place. And secondly, when it comes to misinformation and disinformation as well, it's about surfacing authoritative information on your Google search, on your YouTube platform, as well as on our Gemini. And we've worked with the IEC, for instance, if you were to do a Google search now on how to vote, or where to vote, or where do I find my voting station, you will find on our organized search results page the links that summarize exactly the information that as contained from the IEC website. And if you click on those links, it takes you directly to the website of the IEC, which for us is the authoritative and a reliable source of such information in South Africa. So those are some of the mechanisms that we've put in place in the last year or so, and we will continue to work with them as we head to the polls on May 29.
Thank you, Abongile. I meant antidote, but thank you. You did respond to it. Just a final one is Google restricting AI chatbot Gemini, and this is over elections. Would this apply globally, or is it only for specific countries?
It's globally. It's part of our safe AI principles as a company. We understand that AI can have many unintended consequences. So we are very safe. We've adopted safe principles, and around elections, it's a similar thing. So we've limited searching of information, particularly around political players, or Gemini making statements around political players, because we understand how certain people can misconstrue that information and spread it as a source of truth.
Thank you so much for your time. Abongile Mashele is the head of government affairs and public policy at Google. Really appreciate your time.